Obocheach tocheach et amitecha in the Torah. Giving rebuke. Giving rebuke means to point out certain faults or weaknesses. With what idea? With hopefully helping the individual correct his ways. Rebuke is not only for certain actions that are not correct, that are wrong, that are not compatible with the Torah, but it's also in order to help one with a certain midah. A midah may not be something which is contrary to a particular mitzvah in the Torah. A midah is a certain characteristic that if one is able to control himself, if one is able to deal with it, hopefully he will work on it. Hopefully he will have an interest in dealing with it, because it may help him not only in his relationship with his spouse, but also with better interacting with other human beings. Midot tovot, good character, is very important. As I pointed out in the past, perhaps the greatest success or failure of an individual in this life depends on his character, depends on how he commingled with his peers. Did he get along? Was he well liked? Did he earn himself a good name or not? Obviously, one wants to fulfill his mission, one wants to get a job with the Almighty, one wants to get along with God too. But in many ways, derech eretz kadma Torah, as I pointed out, derech eretz meaning good character, ethics, are much more important. They come first. They are the foundation of everything. Ocheach tocheach et amitecha, therefore, perhaps is step number 2 on the foundation called Kol Yisrael Arevin Ze Laze that we spoke about, I think, last week, where everyone is responsible for another Jew. One of those responsibilities is in giving the musar. Musar meaning teaching, showing the way, or simply pointing out, hey, you have a problem, you got to deal with it. So it is our responsibility, but I translated here the mitzvah as to giving rebuke to those who are in your sphere of influence. Because if they're not in your sphere of influence, there's somebody that you don't really know, that you may not succeed. He's not a relative, he's not a neighbor, he's not a partner, he's not a friend. You may want to point it out casually, maybe, if you have a 50-50 chance of success. But you don't want to get hit over your head, in case the individual doesn't appreciate it. So our obligation, our duty, the mitzvah of Ocheach tocheach et amitecha, firstly affects amitecha. Yeah. First affects amitecha. Amitecha meaning those who are close to you, friends, colleagues, partners, and neighbors, and so forth. Giving rebuke, therefore, is very important, because that may be the only opportunity where that individual will hear about a fault. There might be some who might be too shy to tell it to them, may be afraid of them. And if you have the courage, you recognize it, as long as you're constructive and you're positive about it and you really mean to help them, then this is a great opportunity. As Rabbi Yonatan actually says, a friend's musar, a friend's rebuke, can be much more successful than 1,000 speeches of a rabbi. A rabbi, we hear rabbis, we hear lectures, but a friend might be much more effective. Point number 2, don't point out a weakness in another that you have. If you have if you have that weakness, don't point it out. Why? Because then you won't be effective. If you have a problem, then how could you tell somebody else? Father tells his son, why don't you go pray? Daddy, but you don't go yourself. How effective will you be? So if you are going to give musar, point number 2 is make sure that you don't really have that weakness. Now, there is one exception to that. If you include yourself in the musar. You know what, Joe? We both have to work on something. That's different. And even though you have the problem, but if you're including yourself, that's a whole different approach. So you got to be careful. You want to be effective, it has to be from your heart, it has to be constructive, and you can't have the problem. Point number 3, a true friend will give constructive criticism and not flattery. Now, for those of you who know a little bit about Virgo, you will realize why I chose these points, because we will be talking a lot about criticism tonight. The specialty of Virgo. So a true friend will give constructive criticism and not flattery. He's a true friend. He will actually be interested, hopefully, in you having a share to the world to come, Olam Haba, he will point out your weaknesses. I'm interested in you. I want you to have a good life. I want you to get along. I want you to succeed. That's why I'm pointing out your faults and weaknesses. That's called constructive criticism. A friend that only flatters you, Hanufa, Chaplusi, right, in Farsi,
Yeah.
that's not a friend. Right? That's not a friend. He's basically trying to be on your good side, trying to show that he cares about you, but he doesn't really care. Somebody who truly cares will point out your weaknesses. And believe me, if you're close to someone, they will have enough time to see some weakness. We're not angels. To be the best teacher, the most effective teacher, you want to be a good example, which is similar to what we said before about not telling somebody something about the problem that you yourself have. Be a good example. But this is a very powerful point, and I'll tell you why. There are many couples, perhaps, where one is much getting ahead more than the other in doing teshuvah. He's getting ahead. He's stronger. The other one has not caught up. What do? The other one may not be as interested. You just split, you get divorced. No. Be a good example. Eventually, that other individual who has not caught up will see, wow, this man or this woman has changed so much for the better, of course, as a result of his commitments, his new commitments. Perhaps I should look into it myself. Perhaps I should attend a class and find out more about his new or her new way of life, if it's made him a better person. So continue to be who you are, who you've committed to be a good example, and perhaps your spouse and children will follow suit. That may be your only chance. Instead of talking about it and arguing about it, you may never get through. You may not know how to argue. You may not know what to say. Right? You really have to be prepared if you're going to be saying something to defend your position. What if you can't? It's something new to you. So the best way to be convincing, or the best teacher, is to be a good example. A good example of your new commitment, that is. Number 5, Rabbi says, לעולם ישאל אדם את עצמו מתי יגיעו מעשיי למעשי אבותיי אברהם, יצחק ויעקב. One should always ask himself, when will my ways come close to the ways of my forefathers? One should always aspire to emulate the ways of his forefathers, to be like them. Our forefathers were better than us, were stronger than us, were more committed than us. And the rabbis tell us, aspire to be like them, have something to look up to. And even though they're very great, and their level might be something almost out of our reach, but if you don't aspire at all, you'll never get anywhere. Aspire to get there. Even if you got halfways, at least you got there halfways. So let them be their role model. Let them be your source of inspiration. Look up to them. And they are definitely somebody that you want to look up to them. If a Jew does not look up to his forefathers, then he's suffering from Darwinism syndrome, I call it. Why? Because Darwin claims, based on his theology, if I can call it that human beings today are much more advanced in the past. Everybody else was a monkey compared to this generation. Well, if everybody else was a monkey before him, then there's no respect for the past generation. There's no respect, therefore why should they emulate? Why should they look up to them? One who realizes that those who came before us were wiser, were more committed, were stronger, if he's convinced of that, then hopefully that should give him some impetus in wanting to be like them. Very important point in wanting to improve yourself is to look back and try to emulate the ways of our forefathers. Read about their lives, read about their biographies, read the books that they wrote. And there's no doubt in my mind that one who does that regularly will be inspired and will want to be one of them, will want to be like them. Tonight, in speaking a little bit about Virgo, we're going to be talking about an earthy element. Remember, there's 4 elements: fire, air, water, and earth. And the earthy elements are more practical, down to earth, consistent, reliable, in some ways dependable, predictable. Very, very powerful element. Nevertheless, there's 3 of those elements. We have the Capricorn, we have the Taurus, and the Virgo. We've spoken about the Taurus. Each one of the various elements, each one of the same element, will express itself a little bit different. Virgo is the most versatile, the most adaptable of all the three. And that's important to keep in mind because Earth is not so adaptable. Earth is pretty firm, very stubborn usually. But Virgo of all three is the least stubborn. And that's good to know if you married one. That even though they may come across as stubborn, you can convince them much more easily than a Taurus or a Capricorn. August 23 to September 22nd, approximately, depending on location. It could be a number, it could be a little bit off by a day or sometimes, depending where you were born, the hour you were born. They tend to be more modest and shy. Here you have just a brief description. Very meticulous, practical, diligent, intelligent, analytical, but they are very, very fussy. And we'll see why in a moment. Overcritical and harsh, perfectionists and conservatives. They like order, health foods. They have lists of things they want to do. They don't like sloppy workers. This is just a general description of Virgo. We're going to get a little bit more into in depth as to how you can recognize them, what to look out for, how perhaps you can help them, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, what they need to work on, what midot, characteristics they have to refine. But just remember, there is no good or bad sign. Virgo, just like any other signs, has certain things that we very much envy or would like to have, and they can be a great help to certain individuals more than to others. After all, when people get married, they marry certain types for good reason. Hopefully, if it's a match made in heaven, which many times it is, it will be those that complement each other and need each other. You're not necessarily marrying your best friend, remember. You're lucky if you do. But hopefully you will be marrying somebody that you need and somebody that needs you. There will be qualities in each one of you that are in need of each other. That's called complementing. Exert kenegdo. She or he will be a help if they choose to. They still have free will. They can be brutal. They can be selfish. They can be alcoholics and drug addicts. And they can ruin an otherwise potentially good relationship. So we're talking about decent human beings that are somewhat educated and really have an interest in succeeding in life. If one gets married and doesn't care about whether marriage succeeds or not, if that's his attitude, after Sheva Brachot, they might divorce. If all they're thinking is about making an impression and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and inviting their friends to the wedding, if that's what they think a wedding is all about, then of course they may not have a good chance of succeeding. Life, everyone's life, has many challenges, ups and downs. Everybody does. Obviously, the more glue you have, the more respect you have for each other, the better the chances that you will succeed. But in the end, it all depends on what you've made, what decision you have made. A lot will depend on your decision. And of course, to make the right decision, it is very helpful if one is guided by the Torah, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. In the meantime, let's see a little bit about what Virgo is all about. Okay, Virgo. As opposed to a Leo, remember Leo stands out in the crowd, you can hear him from a mile away. Well, a Virgo doesn't really stand out too much. They're more the loner type, more gentle, quiet. You don't notice them right away. However, he or she, as a Virgo, they will notice the smallest details. Many of them are always looking at their watch, trying to figure out how much time they have till the next meeting or to do the next thing. Dresses neatly and is cool in manner. You usually won't find him in social gatherings. Now you might tell me, I know a Virgo who's very sloppy. That's possible. Most of them are neat. Most of them care about neatness. But depending on his rising, depending on his hour, depending on other factors, he may not be as concerned about his outward appearance. But most of them are very neat and clean. It's important to them. They are perfectionists. So you see, once you get to know the Virgo, you will see that certain things just go together. Because they are perfectionists, that perfectionism does not only apply to how they do things, it applies to how they dress too. They're hardworking, and they can be found working late at night at their office. Do all of them work late in the office? No. But if they're at home, they stay up late. They're hard workers, very dedicated. They're too busy to be daydreamers, have little patience with laziness. They're really dedicated to whatever it is that they do. Of all the mazalot, I think they are the ones that can stand intense work over a longer period of time, more than anybody else. They can take it. But watch out, they sometimes tackle more work than they can safely handle, and as a result, they have to be very careful with having a nervous breakdown. That can happen. Who has nervous breakdown? Whoever's nerves are shattered. Whose nerves are shattered? Either one who's the nervous type, or one who's a perfectionist, very demanding of himself and of others. If things don't go exactly, or he's very punctual and precise, then that creates a certain tension in the nerves. That causes nervous breakdown. People who are more easygoing, who are not so demanding and not so perfection, are not going to have a nervous breakdown that easily. They may have other problems. They may have depression. They may be moody. But one whose nerves are sensitive, delicate, or one who simply is so demanding and exacting, he can have a nervous breakdown. One of the first impressions you get of the Virgo when you first meet him, very easily, very noticeable, you look at him and it appears that he has some problem. He's worried about something. There's some serious problem on his mind that he's trying to solve. You will know many times, not always, not every moment of the day, but many times they have this worried look on their face. Because worry comes naturally to them. The Virgo has inner anxieties that keep nagging at him and that upset his digestion and emotional balance. He's not the moody type, but again, because of his I don't know, some people call it insecurities, but I wouldn't even call it insecurity or fears. It's more of an anxiety. He wants things done in a certain way. He wants things done in a certain time. This has much more to do with anxiety than insecurity about himself. It's not that he lacks confidence. It's much more anxieties. It's a very fine difference, anxiety, fears, insecurity. But if you understand what anxieties mean, Virgos have anxieties. They are very critical in nature, much more than anybody else, very critical. They notice things. Now, is that good or bad? Well, you will see. It could be good or bad. They notice things and they criticize. They're fussy about how they look. They even will criticize themselves. Oh, I didn't come out so good in this picture. An Aquarius wouldn't even pay attention to how he came out in the picture. There are other pictures. What's the big deal? They're much fussy about photographs. They're meticulous and conservative in how they dress, and fastidious and exacting about cleanliness and about what they eat. Many of them are always taking showers, a lot of showers. They want to be clean, look good. Now, this is not the looking good like the Leo woman standing before the mirror, spending tons of money on cosmetics. Now, this is much more just cleanliness. Has nothing to do with making an impression. I want others to see me, and therefore I will spend all this money. They're just for themselves. They want to be clean and feel good about themselves. Very big difference between the Leo and the Virgo. He may criticize everything you say with hair-splitting arguments. He's good in arguing. Very good in arguing. They'll argue almost anything with you. But, even though they argue with you, if you're stuck, they will be quickly to move in to help. He may even attempt to straighten things out without even being asked. He wants to organize things his way. And why does he do this? Because he's always trying to make order from chaos. He notices things, and if he doesn't like them, he'll come into your house and he'll make it, organized. Many of their homes are really organized. As a guest, he will happily help the hostess clean up after the party. Somebody stays behind and helps the hostess, good chance he's a Virgo. But he will also be the one to notice that the cushion was placed on the couch to hide a stain or a cigarette burn. That will be the Virgo. Oh, I see it. Somebody else will not notice it. Somebody else will not pay attention. The Virgo, I guarantee you, will notice everything in the house. Some more, some less. Now, one of the problems that Virgos have, criticism I didn't really say was a problem yet. You want to know what a real problem Virgo has? They will deny their habits and their traits. you point out something to them, you are like this, what are you talking about? And that is because they have a certain blindness to their faults. They don't see too clearly their weaknesses as they see others. And you may ask why. I said before that they are demanding of themselves, they're perfectionists, so why shouldn't they admit and agree, you know what, you're right, thanks for telling me. Why do they have this mental block? And this is a very famous saying that is attributed to Virgo, because they see so much details, they can't see the forest for the trees. In other words, they're able to see a lot of things, but they can't see the general picture, the general problem that they have. They will see, if you point out the little details, maybe they'll pick up. But if you point out just a general characteristic about them, a trait, how do you see that? You know, so that's a problem. That's, you know, it may take a while until they admit it, until they notice it themselves.
How long?
He just can't help noticing others' faults. He just can't help notice. They'll notice it, but will fiercely resent open criticism of his own mistakes. What do? You still point them out, but do it tactfully. That's your only chance. You won't win if you're not tactful. Complete denial. They tend to be concerned about health matters, very much. One of the top of all the signs that are very much into health matters, dieting, health foods. They will be very conscious about what they eat, calories and things like that. They're usually not lavish with affection or spending money. Now, what do I mean by not lavish with affection? I pointed out much more when I separate the men and the women. That they're not the type that demonstrate affection with hugs and kisses and all of that. They're just not the type. Or with spending money, they're not your big spenders. Thank God for those who don't want a big spender, right? They're prudent, giving their love quietly and not demonstratively. In other words, they will give their love, they're very loving, and they're warm. They're normal about that, but not too demonstrative. More quiet. They like truth, punctuality, and economy. You know what I mean by economy? That means they don't spend a lot. They prefer to look for sales. They hate dirt, vulgarity, and sloppiness. Now this one is a funny one, and I've noticed this a lot. I have experience with Virgos. They may run their finger on the furniture every night looking for dust. All the time. You know, they're clean, so they will, you just cleaned it yesterday. No, maybe there's a bit more. They're very practical, but with excessive discrimination. Now, what happens here is you might say, okay, this applies more to a woman than to a man. Yes, some things do more to a woman than more to a man. A man may not be cleaning up, dusting around, depending on how much of a typical Virgo he is. Remember, the more typical, the cleaner. The more perfectionist, the more critical. But even then, between men and women, there are some differences, because there's different emphasis, different priorities when it comes to what a man values and what a woman values, what they care about, where they're going to spend their time and efforts in. But they're very discriminative. Actually, let me see if I missed anything here. Yeah, I think we skipped an important page here. They have precise ideas about health. And they're very nice to have around the sick room. If you have a headache, your Virgo friend will go to the drugstore. Actually, if you visit a Virgo's home, you may find a mini drugstore in their medicine cabinet. Check it out. You will find relief for stomach aches, constipation, and acid indigestion, and other things. I just put a few examples here. Many of them are expert in telling you what remedy to take, and they may be familiar with the ingredients. Actually, many of them make good nurses. Now, why do they make good nurses? Not because they're familiar with ingredients, but because they're efficient. They're very efficient, they have sympathy, and are very capable. So that's one of the areas where they excel. They make good secretaries too. They obviously can do other jobs too. But many of them are good nurses. As friends, they are dependable and sincere. However, when they become annoyed, they become cranky, scolding, and nervous. Now, some people have the wrong impression of Virgos. They think that they're stingy. The reason why they think like that of their friends who are Virgos, that they're stingy, is because certain things they do give that impression. The truth is that they are economical. Now, when I point out economical, remember, there are extremes. If somebody's overly economical, then he could be stingy. By the way, there's something called a miser. Do you know what the difference between a miser and a stingy man is? A stingy is stingy for others, but not for himself. A miser is even for himself. Does not spend on himself. And that's more of a disease. You know, what are you going to do with all the money? You're going to take it with you? You're not taking it with you, so why you spend? Enjoy life. But that's already an extreme. If we just treat the character, the personality of Virgo fairly, then he's really economical. They don't believe in just splurging. When he buys soap, he will buy it by the dozen if it's cheaper. Others might say, you know what, I don't need that much soap right now. Okay, so what if it's a few pennies more next time? What's the big deal? What am I going to do with it? Store it? Virgos tend to buy in quantities. Now, not for the reason that Aries, remember Aries? Aries may buy a lot. I'm sorry, not Aries. Cancer may buy a lot of something because they're afraid there's going to be some earthquake and they're going to need a lot, so they're going to buy tons of tuna can and hide it under the bed or in the pantry just to have for, you know, for a rainy day or for something happens. Virgo just know it's cheaper, so you buy them by the dozen. They probably have a collection of coupons. It could be penny pinchers. If they bought an item and it later went on sale, they may just return it and buy it over again at a lower price. You know that the gas to go to the store and come back is going to be more than what you can save returning it? They're not going to think like that. No, it's cheaper. So you see, they need somebody to give them, you know, a little bit of sense that it's certain things it just doesn't pay to do. At home, they are very meticulous where they keep things. I assure you that if you move something, they will notice it. They will move it back. They will move it back to their preferred location. Now they get so much into the habit of having certain things in a certain spot, in a certain place, in their dresser, for example, where they keep their socks, that if they ever go to a hotel, they'll put it in the exact same spot in the dresser of the hotel. It's just a certain way of organizing their lives and the way they put things. Let's go a little bit into the Virgo man. The reason I separate them is not only for you to notice the very small differences between men and women. A lot of them they will share. But it's also important for those of you who are dating a Virgo man, or you're married to one, you want to have perhaps a better idea of who you're sharing your life with. They're not so much the romantic type. They will serenade you like the Leo. You know? They actually react coolly to mushy affection. That's not their cup of tea so much. They do love, they do care, but they do it differently. You know what to them love means? Their main way of showing love is through unselfish devotion. And they can be very devoted and very, very, very much unselfish. Actually, I didn't put it down over here, but I'll tell you that a Virgo sometimes will do more for you than for himself. Not every Mazal is capable of doing that. To think first of you, to take care of your needs before theirs, they can be very unselfish, and that's beautiful. But they're not mushy. They're not as mushy, I should say. Do you know what mushy means, by the way? Well, you have to have a little bit of water and earth in you to know what mushy is. Some other time we'll talk about that. His feelings will be steady and not fluctuate. And that's good to know. They're steady. He's dependable. He loves work, duty, and discipline. They're very hardworking, neat and tidy, conscientious and responsible. Now you may ask yourself, wait a minute, you mean to say only he's responsible, all the other signs are not responsible? No. A lot of these characteristics, like responsibilities, you will find in other signs. Cancer is not an earth sign, and he's responsible. Capricorn, Taurus, well, they're earth signs, so they're all responsible. Responsibility is a tricky word. It sounds like something that everybody would want to have, but not everybody has it as much as these signs. And the reason for that is, in order to be truly responsible, you have to be a man of your word. You have to be very disciplined. You have to. That is much more the earth element. Now, take somebody who's an air element. Take Gemini. Can Gemini be accused of not being responsible? Not really. They can be responsible, but not as much as Earth, because Earth is much more punctual, much more will insist on being consistent, and therefore their responsibility is much more intense. Earth is much more serious than air. Takes things much more seriously. So they will feel much more responsible for something. They will take care of something. They will do it. They will work hard at it. That's what responsible means. But it doesn't mean that everybody else cannot be responsible. But there's degrees. These people take life, take their work seriously. Therefore, you can rely on them much more. Very hardworking, very devoted to their jobs. Now, the problem with Virgos is because they're more the loner type, because they're a little bit more detached somewhat, they can remain single for a long time. They're not the ones like the Leos or the Tauruses or the Pisces who will really want to be interested in having a partner, in getting married. Everybody wants to get married, but they're not going to necessarily jump at it. Why? It stems from various characteristics that they possess. One of them being that they are very critical and picky. They're actually one of the most pickiest when it comes not only to food, but to people. They don't make friends easily. They're very particular. And that could be sometimes a problem, pushing off marriage because they're being picky, in particular. Also, as I said, they're more of the loner. If Chas v'Shalom, the marriage breaks up by a Virgo, they don't have to remarry, as much as others who will look immediately. Remember Leo? Leo doesn't stay single for too long. He needs somebody to adore him. Right? Virgo is fine. Virgo will not look for what Leo looks. And that is why they stay single many times, more easily than others. He is modest. Modest means sanua in Hebrew, not showy. And even though when it comes to clothing, we have something called modesty in clothes, you may find a non-Jewish Virgo who's not too modest in the way she dresses. She can be even provocative. But I assure you that even amongst the Goyim, Goyot, Virgo women will not be as immodest as some of the other signs who will want to be more showy about the different parts of their body. Even a non-Jewish woman who's a Virgo will tend to usually be more modest. What are they looking for, the Virgo man? They're looking for a decent, honest, and genuine relationship. That is their main emphasis. Decent, honest, and a genuine relationship. They can show incredible strength in emotional and material hardship at hard times because they're devoted, they're sincere, they're real. He will not shower you with money like the Leo, take you out to expensive restaurants. Remember the Leo of last week? The exact opposite when it comes to taking you out, much more economical. But he will be gentle and tender companion, especially when you are ill. He'll take care of you better than some other mazalot. They have a very clear, good memory, and therefore they remember special dates. Will remember your birthday, your anniversary. Loyal, dependable, considerate, and with good discipline. As a parent, you will not spoil his child. However, one of the problems that Virgo parents have, actually I'm going to talk a little bit about it with the women and with the men, is that they may have a hard time demonstrating affection to their children. This is not so much a problem for the woman, because the woman, the mother, is much more perhaps demonstrative, her kids, her children, her bubalach, right? But the man may have a harder time demonstrating affection. Now, this is not only the Virgo man. There are other men who are not as demonstrative with their children. And that's something that they need to learn, to show their affection, not just to say it or to prove it with being devoted by buying them something, but to be a little bit more physical. Not every father is as physical, affectionate with his children. They will spend time with their children and teach them. Now, this is very good. Spending time with children, some people who become workaholics may not do so. They may neglect spending time with their children. Now, Virgo, even though he can work late hours, he will spend time with the children. And he will teach them. But he may expect too much of them and be too critical. This is another problem with the Virgo parent, that sometimes they can expect too much. And be critical. Remember, they're critical, and they expect, not that they're demanding certain things, they simply are expecting certain standards. The child may not be capable. If you're married to one, get used to being criticized. But what should you do about it? Just laugh. Just laugh at it. Just ignore him, because he simply can't help it. It's not out of malice. It's not that he really doesn't like you. If he criticizes you, that's just his way. That's the way he is. Just laugh. Just take it in stride. No. There's nothing you can do about it. You're never going to change that. But when it comes to his faults, please be tactful. Because remember what we said before? They can't take criticism lightly. He will criticize and do a good job at it. But when it comes your turn to criticize him, do it very tactfully. Because we all have faults, but not everybody likes to hear that they have faults. A Virgo doesn't necessarily or easily admit to them, and therefore if you do so, if you criticize him, do it with tact. Okay, Virgo woman. Anybody dating a Virgo woman? Or married to one? She's more the shy type. If you're dating her, she may not do any of the talking. If you're dating a Leo, they'll do all the talking. And Aries, they'll be talking to you till tomorrow. Right? Some signs have no problem talking. Geminis are excellent talkers too. They won't get tired of talking. But a Virgo woman is more shy. In the beginning, she won't talk as much. And she's more subdued in her passion. Just a little bit more subdued, not as demonstrated. She still has a little bit, of course, they're very warm and caring. I mean, that's normal. But more subdued. She's a perfectionist. Now, because she's a perfectionist, she may think she can do it better and more efficiently, whatever it may be. You thought you were doing a good job? She'll say, no, I can do it better. Let me show you how. They have a very clear vision. I don't mean 20/20 necessarily. She will spot any stain on your collar. She will notice it. Things that you didn't even think you had, she will notice it. She'll be particular about small things, but she will be kind and generous. Even though she's being very particular, certain things, small things bother her, but kind and generous. Has a mental block when it comes to admitting her faults. Like we said before, they don't take criticism easily. And you know what? I added another very important point. There's no need for you to criticize her, because she judges herself harshly and doesn't need your help. You're going to criticize her about something. Usually she may have known about it or noticed it before, even though they have a hard time admitting it. They themselves are harsh enough or demanding of themselves sufficiently that it's not necessary to point it out to them. She doesn't need your help. Most of the time when she criticizes you, she's right. Most of the time. Right? That is because before we said that they can argue just about anything. They're very good at arguing. But many times, when a woman who's a Virgo criticizes you, she may have a good point. So pay attention to the criticism. Will not tolerate abusive language and sloppy clothing. Now, what does abusive language mean? Remember, we said that they're perfectionists. So what that means is that they're careful more about their English, their grammar. It has to be perfect. It has to be just right. If you misspell something, say something wrongly, they'll point it out to you. Not just about how you dress, but even how you speak. And definitely, if it's abusive, if it's vulgar, they can't take it because they're more clean, they're more pure. Therefore, they cannot tolerate language that is abusive, that is vulgar, or sloppy clothing. They have a harder time with it. One of the typical examples of a Virgo having a problem with something that is sloppy is going into the kitchen. Why don't you clean up after yourself? You know, they cannot stand seeing dishes in the sink for too long. Now, over the years, some Virgo women have told me that they just got tired of, doing that many dishes, and they are able to accept that the dishes are there overnight. But usually they're very, very critical about things being dirty or laying around and not clean. You may need to shave and shower more often if you're married to one, and put on aftershave. Again, this is I confirm this one. They very much want you smelling good and looking good, and if you don't look good or smell not right, they'll point it out. And you may wonder, wait a minute, why did somebody else not tell me that? Why are you the only one to say it? Well, they're the ones to notice it. But it's more than noticing. Others will notice it perhaps too. It will bother them. Others will say, well, what's the big deal? Okay. So you don't look so great. So you wore your shirt, every day of the week, the same shirt. Big deal, that's. But to them it makes a difference. And it bothers them. Now if something bothers your spouse, you want to have a good relationship with them, you listen to them, you try to accommodate them. What can you do? Especially if it doesn't take that much work. So put on some good aftershave, or if you don't shave, some good deodorant. It's important to them. You can trust her even with your money. She won't splurge it. She won't throw away your money. There might be an exception somewhere out there, but most of Virgos are very economical, so they, when it comes to money, you don't have any worries. Remember about the Leo, you have to watch your credit card? You don't have that problem usually here. Get used to her emptying your trash can every few minutes and going through your laundry. That's the type, right? She's that type that will go through your laundry. Oh, this is not clean enough. Why didn't you put it in the laundry? This belongs in the laundry. You can't wear that anymore. And whether it's an ashtray or a trash can, it's going to be clean. Every few minutes they're going to go through it. Has a deep sense of responsibility that can hold the family together. They're very responsible, very deep sense of responsibility. They care a lot about everything being just right, and they will do whatever they can to hold the family together. As a mother, will never neglect the physical and educational needs of her children. I added both, physical and educational. They make good mothers, devoted, and they will not neglect them. Now, you may ask me, wait a minute, you mean some other mothers will neglect their children? I mean, that's a very powerful statement. To neglect or not to neglect. Let me tell you what happens with other signs. With other signs, it's not that they intentionally want to neglect their children, but they're so independent, and they're so into their careers, perhaps, or so into their looks, depending on the Mazal, that they're not intentionally neglecting, but they won't pay attention. Well, I think you will agree, not paying enough attention, neglecting. If a child needs a certain attention, and you don't give enough attention, you are neglectful. And certain signs, because they're so much into themselves, not that they love themselves, but because their careers or whatever, that they may neglect their children. Virgos, remember, are unselfish, devoted, hardworking. They notice things too. So when you add that combination of noticing, devoted, hardworking, practical, meticulous, of course they're not going to neglect their children. Put on your sweater. It's cold outside. it's not that cold, but and it's not that they're being overprotective like a Cancer. It's just that because they're more perfectionists. They will notice certain things, and it has to be done their way. So that's good. In some ways, that's very good, not to neglect to pay attention to certain small things that others would overlook. Not that they want to overlook, they simply don't see it. They will see every little thing. They will instill in their children good habits and ethics. Well, good habits and ethics isn't that important to everyone? Yes, it may be, but to them it's more important than to others. This will be very much a priority. Good manners, good ethics, working habits. She will organize your work and your house will always be clean. Well, so if you got married to a Virgo, at least your house will not be so messy, and your work will be more organized. Your desk will be organized. They'll take care of it for you. They may complain about it and criticize you about it, but they'll still do it for you. Just accept the criticism as long as everything is clean. What do you care? You don't do it, they're going to do it anyway. So just let them criticize. The best way to deal with this criticism is just, as I said before, just laugh. That's the way they are. They actually, mean well. They really do. They mean well. They're critical of themselves sometimes too. Very, very devoted, good, reliable, and it's really a blessing to have a Virgo around, as long as they're not too critical, of course. Somebody who's too critical, this could be a problem. But everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and Virgo is not an exception. And these qualities will be very good for some men, and not very good for other men. So it depends. Obviously, not everybody is going to marry a Virgo woman. He may want a Leo woman. He may want a Taurus woman, depending on what he likes. And the interesting thing is that I haven't talked about it yet, but in life, there's something called chemistry. And you just naturally feel attracted or not attracted to the signs. And I tested it out, asked people who their best friends are, who they get along with better. And it's just that some people just get along better with this, some people get along better with that. But it also depends on your hour. Depending on the hour, you may be typical or not a typical of your sign. Okay, a little bit of advice for Virgo children and advice for the Virgo boss. As far as the children, they are alert. They're quick, they're adaptable. And that's good. Adaptability is important when people move from house to house, from school to school, and that can happen to children. They will adapt, they will adjust easily. They're quick and alert. They will pay attention to details. However, they will be picky and fussy about what they eat. As I pointed it out before, they're more the picky type and the more fussy type. Point number 3 is a very important point when it comes to a Virgo child. Don't stress mistakes too much. They may worry. They are the worry type. They worry, remember? They worry a lot. So if you stress too much their mistakes, their faults, it's going to cause them just to worry. Point it out tactfully. This has to be corrected and so forth, but not too much. Be careful not to overdo it. They cannot take too much criticism. They are neat and disciplined. Usually a Virgo child will not have a problem with being neat and disciplined. Right? Now, a Leo child, remember we spoke about a Leo, may be too bossy, may tell others what to do. This Virgo is not the bossy type. On the contrary, he's more disciplined, he's more fair. He's more of a loner, so he may not have too much of a big circle anyway. But you won't have the problems that you have with Leo. A good idea for a Virgo child is get them to read as much as possible. When they read a lot, they become knowledgeable. They become very knowledgeable in many areas. Remember, they have a good memory, so they pick up things well. They can become experts in many fields. And reading is very good for them. Reading is very healthy for them. Another idea of why reading is good for a Virgo child, even though it's not here, is because they tend to be a little bit restless. What comes with being quick and adaptable is a little bit of restlessness. Not that they're not patient. They're not like the Geminis. They can sit and read, and they're not like the Aries that they won't read through a whole book. They can actually read a whole book. But they can be restless. And restless, of course, means that they may want to do something else. They may want to change. If they read a good book, and if they're curious, and many of them are about the topic, then that's going to keep them busy. And when a child is busy, guess what? He stays out of trouble. Not that a Virgo is going to get into trouble like an Aries or a Scorpio. Some signs just get into trouble, right? He won't get into trouble so much, but this will be quality time for a Virgo. Advice for a Virgo boss: they have troubles and worries of their own. They can't hear about yours. So if you have a problem to share with them, they're so into their problems and their worries that if you're expecting listening ear, this is not the Cancer, who will listen to everything that you have to say and actually try to help you out. Not that the Virgo boss doesn't want to help you, he just doesn't. He's so into his own problems and worries that he just cannot handle another one. Now, what's interesting about a Virgo boss is that you won't find too many who are their own boss. Now, what do I mean by their own boss? I don't mean working independently. That you will find a lot of the people who are independent. But a boss means telling others what to do. Virgos are much better in managing and doing what others tell them to do. They're very efficient in doing something that they're asked to do. But to give orders to others, to manage a whole company, no. They're not necessarily going to be a president of a company. They're usually going to be perhaps the chairman of the board. Yeah. Certain responsibilities, yes. But you will not find too many Virgo bosses of big corporations. That's just not, they don't prefer. They don't look for that. The Cancer, the Leo, the Aries, yes. And the Capricorn, of course. Eventually, sooner or later, they'll be at the top. Virgo, very rarely. But if they're there, I just put some advices together in cases they're there, in case they're in the high top position. A lot of Virgos will tend to do the work themselves. Remember other signs like Leo and to an extent Aries will delegate. You do it, you take care of it. They can't handle the details. Virgo, because they can handle the details, because they're so devoted and it's their duty, it's their company, they may actually do part of their work themselves instead of giving it to an employee. You will find it's very interesting. If you look at many companies, you compare the boss, some bosses are actually doing the work with their workers, sitting down. Some of them are just sitting behind a chair, enjoying the fresh air with a cigar, delegating it to someone else. Just different types. The Virgo actually will be involved. If he's the boss, he may actually do some of the work himself. However, if you have a Virgo boss, be prepared for criticism. Don't make mistakes and don't be sloppy. Now, everybody makes a mistake once in a while, but I just wrote it for, the sake of remembering that in case you do, he will notice it and he will criticize it. So be careful not to make a mistake. He will be considerate, but don't expect glamorous promotions. Not with a Virgo. Why is that? Everybody should know by now why you can't expect to get a big bonus or promotion from a Virgo boss. If you were listening, why is that? Because they're economical. Well, the cost of living didn't go up that much. What do you need? A bonus or promotion? Not that they don't want to help you out. They're not going to. They don't believe in giving away that much money. They're more thrifty, more economical. So you can't expect it. That's all. And last but not least, always tell them the truth. Now, that sounds something like you should do with anyone. No, with Virgo especially. Don't lie to them. And they can tell a lie very, very well. They can detect it. You can't smooth talk them. A Gemini will not be able to smooth talk the Virgo. The Virgo will be able to see through the Gemini. He's smooth talking me. He's making up the story over here. He's not the type to be flattered. He's not the type that you can just lie to him. They pick up on the details. They're very analytical, remember, and they will catch it. They will notice everything. So you don't want to lie. You want to tell them the truth, especially since they believe in the truth. They're not crooked. Most of them are not, at least. Occasionally you can find anything. But they're very much truthful and devoted and hardworking, and therefore there's certain things that they will not tolerate. Okay, let's just go quickly over to the midot. Okay, here we go. Just quickly, the various midot that I put together here, a list of certain characteristics that some have to work on and some have it naturally, they don't have to work on. Gava, arrogance, is that a problem for Virgo? No. Anava, humbleness, actually, he's pretty humble, he's shy, he's modest, so he shouldn't have a problem with developing a fair amount of humbleness. Busha, he is shy. He's the shy type, the modest type, again, timidity, bashfulness, no problem with that. Does he have a problem with azut, aggressiveness? No. He's not the aggressive type. Even though he's a little critical, but that's not related to azut. Ahava, does he need to develop his lovingness, his affection? Perhaps a little bit, to be more demonstrative. Not to come across as too cool or detached. Sinah, does he hate? He doesn't really hate. Does he have compassion? Of course he has a little compassion. He's unselfish. But the problem with compassion is that sometimes it requires money. Right? Compassion sometimes requires money, and he might be a little bit tight on that, on the money part. But he is compassionate. I mean, he doesn't lack compassion. Achzariyut, he's not cruel. Simcha, happiness, he could use a little bit of happiness because he's a serious type. Daga, he has too much worry, right? So that's a little bit too much of a good thing. Even though he needs to be concerned about mistakes, but sometimes too much worry, too much concern is no good. Harata, does he regret? Does he admit his fault? No, not always. So he may have a little bit of work to do on harata. Ka'as, does he get very angry? Not really. He's not the one to quickly get angry. Ratzon, can he be appeased? Can he be calmed down? Yes. He's flexible. He's adaptable. He's not intransigent. Kin'ah, is he the jealous type, the possessive type? No, not that much. He's practical, down to earth. He's unselfish. So a person who's unselfish is not really jealous. He will not have the problem of jealousy. Zrizut, is he diligent and quick? Yes, he is. No problem with that. Zeirut, is he cautious? Yes, he won't gamble. He's more conservative. Asud, is he lazy? No, he hates lazy people. Nedivut, is he generous and kind? He can be. He can be, depending on how stingy he is. Taikanut, which means stinginess, he may have to work on a little bit to be more generous. Zechira, does he remember? Yes, he has an excellent memory. The problem is he will remember what you did to him 25 years ago too. He will remember he's critical, and he might remember what you did. Shikachat, to forget. He doesn't forget. So that is good too. He won't forget, he won't forget what you did to him, but he won't forget the favor that you did to him too. So that's good. He doesn't have the problem for forgetfulness. Some signs are forgetful. They don't pay attention. And some are even worse. They're ungrateful. They recognize, they know the good that you did to them, and they simply choose to ignore it. See, somebody simply forgets. All right, what can we do? He forgets. There are people who choose to forget, and that's terrible. Shetika, can he be quiet? Yes, he could be quiet. He can keep his mouth shut when he's not criticizing, that is. He can keep, because he's not the talkative type. Sheker, does he lie? No, he believes in the truth. Emet, he doesn't have to work on telling the truth because he believes in saying the truth. Hanifut, flatter, he's not the flatter type because he's truthful. He's genuine. Lashon hara, will he gossip? He may have a problem with Lashon hara. Why is that? Because he criticizes. Anybody who's critical will have a problem with Lashon hara. He might ridicule people, he might look down at people, he might talk about them, talk about their faults, point them out. Hey, you can't say that, you can't talk about that, be careful with your mouth. You be careful with that tongue. You have a very sharp tongue. Lashon hara can be a big problem for a Virgo. Be accepting of people's faults. Don't talk about their faults. It's none of your business sometimes to talk about a fault. We're talking about other people now. Your spouse, you can talk to them a whole day long. If you got used to it, they'll hear you. But about somebody else, be careful. Teshuvah, can they do repentance? Can they correct themselves? Can they change their ways? Well, they're adaptable, and they really want a perfectionist, and they demand a lot of themselves, so they should have no problem with doing teshuvah. Torah, can they learn Torah? Yes, they can read, they have a good memory, they can be consistent, dedicated, they have what it takes to learn Torah, to set aside time to learn Torah, to study. Yirat Shamayim, God-fearing, they're modest, they're truthful, they shouldn't have a problem with having fear for the Almighty. You know, after all, they're organized, they want to do things right. Sabranut, will they be patient? Not always. They will not always be patient with people's faults. They might be patient with their children a little bit, but even with their children, they may be asking and demanding too much of them. Not patient enough. It's okay for them to make a mistake once in a while. Nothing happened. So what? No. They sometimes will have to point it out right away, so they may have to work a little bit on their patience. Ta'ava, do they have a lot of desires for money, for food, for honor? They don't have any problem with that. They're actually more prudent, more modest, more subdued. Kavod, do they need the honor like the Leo does? No, they don't need it. I mean, everybody wants appreciation, but they're not. It won't hurt them so much if they don't get the kavod. Nekama, do they take revenge? They don't have that problem. Even though they remember the faults, they will criticize, but they won't hurt you. If you're good to them, a Virgo will never hurt you. You can be assured of that. Dikaon, depressed. No, they usually don't go into depression as much as other earth signs. However, if they're very critical of themselves, if they feel terrible about themselves, they don't look good, all the pictures of the family, of the video, of this, it won't put them into depression, but they may be a little bit sad. Leitzanud, are they clowns? No, they're not going to clown around like the Sagittarius or like the Leo. They're more serious. They're more the quiet type. Remember, they're more the shy type, so they're not going to clown around. They're going to get work done. They're not going to fool around, and they won't tolerate others fooling around either. These are the basic midot. There are obviously other midot, and anybody who's serious, obviously, on working on himself or herself, it would be a good idea to get to know yourself, as I've pointed out many times. The more we know ourselves, the easier it is for us to admit or to recognize what we need to work on. But I want to end with the final note that I've started with, is that, ladies and gentlemen, the only real way to get a hold of ourselves is using a guide. And the best guide is the Torah. When one sits and learns Torah on a regular basis, especially Sifrei Musar, which are books about ethics and morals and having the right values, he has a better chance of reminding himself, and hopefully he will be able to strengthen himself, because the one who's really after us, trying to hurt us, is not our spouse or our friends, it's the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara who's trying to defeat us, trying to bring us down, trying to hold us back from accomplishing whatever our mission may be. If we remember that, then when there is a potential argument about to explode in the home, we may watch ourselves, we might be a little bit more careful. Hey, that's not in our best interest. That's going to destroy our peace. That's going to destroy the harmony. What are the good children going to pick up? So it takes a lot of patience, a lot of logic, a lot of good reason, but it also takes a desire to succeed. Anyone who truly has an interest and desire to succeed in marriage and any relationship, then hopefully will take the necessary steps of getting to know himself and his spouse. And together, B'ezrat Hashem, each of them will complement each other As you know, the saying goes, 2 heads are better than one. And that is what the purpose of marriage is all about. On your own, you may be having a hard time working on yourself. The books of Musar will help you, but the best one to give you criticism, as long as you accept it, will be your spouse. So if you're criticized, say thank you. This might be the only opportunity for somebody to have noticed something wrong and for you to take the necessary steps to correct it. As long as there's constructive criticism, just take it and be happy with it. Virgo is very, very critical, but they always try to be constructive. Oh, not always, but most of the time. It's important that we recognize that what life is all about is challenges, ups and downs, and from time to time we will make a mistake. If we made a mistake, let's admit it and take the necessary steps to correct it. B'ezrat Hashem, as I pointed out before, when one makes a sincere effort to correct his mistakes, B'ezrat Hashem, he will receive divine assistance. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do teshuvah, wants us to correct our faults, wants us to correct our mistakes, wants us to be better people and have a good marriage. But we need to have an interest on it. And together with the study, the regular study of the Torah, B'ezrat Hashem, we will succeed in that. Thank you very much.